I thought cheating only meant infidelity, until my wife cheated me emotionally for years, used guilt to control me, and finally threw scalding tea at me when I refused to fund her brother again. Leah's mug shattered on the kitchen floor, but not before the tea scalded Aaron's chest. He froze, breath caught, as the heat seared through his shirt and the silence swallowed the room. It had started 10 minutes ago, over breakfast. Aaron was halfway through his coffee, scrolling emails, when Leah dropped the bomb. "Chad needs a loan," she said, her voice casual like she was asking him to pick up milk. "You'll co-sign it, right?" Aaron set his phone down, already bracing himself. "No, Leah, not again." Her eyes flashed, and the air shifted, like a storm rolling in. She was at the dining table, her tablet glowing with a half-finished design, but her stylus froze mid-tap. "What do you mean, no? He's my brother." "I mean no," Aaron said, his voice steady but firm. "I've bailed him out 3 times. Rent. That car repair, his business that went nowhere. We're done." Leah stood, her chair scraping the linoleum. "We? You mean you. You're the one with the money, Aaron. You're the one who gets to play gatekeeper." He leaned against the counter, gripping the edge to keep his frustration in check. Chad's face flickered in his mind, smirking, always with a new excuse, always leaning on Leah's loyalty. The first loan had felt like charity, a way to help her family. But church had turned to expectation, and expectation to entitlement. Each time, Aaron's protests were drowned out by Leah's tears, or rage, her insistence that family came first. His savings were thinner now, his patience thinner still. "It's not just the money," he said, meeting her gaze. "It's the lies. He doesn't pay us back, and you act like it's my fault for noticing. I'm not doing it again." Leah laughed, sharp and bitter. "You're so selfish. You sit there with your steady job, your perfect little life, acting like you're above us. Chad's trying to start over. His family. Family doesn't mean a blank check," Aaron shot back. "We've got bills, Leah. The mortgage, your freelancing doesn't always cover your share. Someone has to think about that." Her face twisted, a mix of hurt and fury. "My share? So now I'm a burden? You think you're better than me, don't you?" "I never said that." Aaron's voice rose despite himself. "I'm trying to keep us afloat. I'm tired of this. Tired of Chad. Tired of fighting about him. Tired of you making me the bad guy." The words landed like a match in gasoline. Leah's breath hitched, her eyes narrowing to slits. "Tired?" she repeated, stepping closer. "Try living with someone who's always judging, always holding back, always making you feel like you're not enough." "You're twisting this," Aaron said, his chest tight. "I'm not the one who—" "Say it," she cut in, her voice low and dangerous. "Go on. What about me?" He stopped, the truth clawing at his throat. "You defend him. You guilt me. You make me feel like I'm failing you when I say no." But he didn't say it. He couldn't. Instead, he turned to the sink, reaching for his mug of tea, the one she'd made him earlier as a rare olive branch. His hand shook slightly, the steam curling in the morning light. "Coward!" Leah spat. She grabbed her own mug from the table, still half full, and before Aaron could react, she threw it. The tea hit first, a wave of heat that burned his chest and stole his breath. The mug followed, grazing his shoulder before it smashed against the floor. Pain flared, sharp and immediate, but it was Leah's face that cut deeper. Defiant, unyielding, not a flicker of remorse. Aaron stood there, tea dripping from his chin, soaking his shirt. His heart pounded, but his mind was blank, as if the heat had scorched away his ability to process. He stared at her, searching for something, regret, shame, anything. But her lips were pressed tight, her eyes blazing. "You don't get to talk to me like that," she said, her voice trembling but cold. "Not in my house." "Your house." The words stung more than the burn. "Not ours. Not anymore." He didn't respond. Couldn't. The air felt too heavy, the kitchen too small. His shoulder throbbed where the mug had hit, but it was the silence that pinned him, the weight of what had just happened. He stepped over the broken porcelain, the crunch under his shoes loud in the stillness, and moved toward the door. His keys were on the hook, his jacket over a chair. He grabbed them, his fingers on the doorknob. "Aaron," Leah said, softer now, almost pleading, but he didn't look back. He didn't trust what he'd see, or what he'd say. The door clicked shut behind him. The morning air was cool, a sharp contrast to the sting on his skin. He stood on the porch, staring at the empty street, the world moving on as if nothing had changed. But something had broken, not just the mug, but a thread he'd been clinging to for too long. He got into his car, the damp shirt clinging to his chest, and started the engine. His phone sat untouched in his pocket, his mind too raw to decide where to go. All he knew was that he couldn't stay, not here, not with her, not after this. As he pulled away, the burn on his skin began to fade, but the ache in his chest only grew. It wasn't just the tea that had scalded him. It was the truth, finally spilling over, impossible to ignore. Aaron drove aimlessly, the hum of the engine a low pulse against the chaos in his head. The tea had dried on his shirt, leaving a stiff, itchy stain, but he barely noticed. His mind was elsewhere, slipping back to a time when mornings with Leah didn't end in shattered mugs and scalded skin. He didn't want to remember. Not now, not after what she'd done. But the memories came anyway, unbidden, like a song stuck on repeat. They'd met 7 years ago at a bookstore, of all places. Aaron, then a lanky software engineer with too many deadlines, had been hunting for a coding manual. Leah was in the art section, flipping through a book on typography, her hair a cascade of dark curls catching the light. She'd caught him staring, grinned, and asked if he was lost. A warm, unguarded sound that made him feel lighter than he had in months. By the time they left, with coffee cups in hand, he was halfway in love. Those early days were a blur of late-night talks and shared dreams. Leah was a freelance designer, her passion for art spilling into everything: sketches on napkins, bold ideas for clients, a vision for a life full of color and freedom. Aaron, steadier, more cautious, adored her fire. He'd always been the guy who planned, who coded clean lines and predictable outcomes, but Leah made him want to take risks. They'd sit on his tiny balcony, splitting cheap wine, imagining a future, a house, maybe kids, a studio for her, a corner office for him. "We'll build something real," she'd say, and he believed her. They married 2 years later, a small ceremony in a park with fairy lights and Leah's handmade invitations. She'd designed their rings, simple bands with a tiny etched wave, a nod to their first date by the ocean. Aaron still wore his, though it felt heavier now, a reminder of promises that hadn't held. The first year was good, messy but good. They fought over dumb things like whose turn it was to do dishes, but always made up by morning. Leah's laugh still came easily then, her touch soft when she curled against him at night. Ched showed up a year into their marriage, Leah's younger brother, 22 and wiry with a charming grin and a knack for trouble. He'd crashed on their couch after losing his job, promising it'd be temporary. Aaron didn't mind at first. Leah lit up around him, her protective streak fierce. But temporary stretched into weeks, then months. Chad borrowed cash for emergencies, vague debts he swore he'd repay. Aaron wrote the first check reluctantly, Leah's gratitude warm enough to quiet his doubts. "He's family," she'd said, and Aaron nodded, ignoring the unease curling in his gut. The asks grew. A phone bill, a car repair. Each time, Leah framed it as a favor to her, not Chad, her eyes pleading or her voice sharp if Aaron hesitated. He paid, because saying no meant days of her silence, her coldness seeping into their home. He started noticing other things. Leah's temper flaring over small slights, her dismissals when he tried to talk about his own stress. "You're fine," she'd say, waving him off. "You've got your job, your routine. Stop complaining." He'd swallow his words, telling himself it was just a phase. But phases don't last 3 years. Leah's passion, once a spark, turned jagged. She'd snap when clients rejected her designs, then take it out on Aaron, blaming him for not supporting her enough. If he pushed back, she'd twist his words, make him feel like the one at fault. "You're overreacting," she'd say, or, "Why do you always make me the bad guy?" He'd apologize, confused, wondering when he'd stopped recognizing her, or himself. Chad's shadow grew larger. The loans became a cycle, each one bigger, each excuse flimsier. Aaron's savings dwindled, his patience with it. Leah defended Chad fiercely, painting him as a victim of bad luck, never mind the late-night calls or the way he dodged Aaron's questions. When Aaron suggested cutting him off, Leah's eyes would blaze. "He's all I have besides you," she'd say. And the guilt would silence. But guilt couldn't cover the bills, or the way Leah's love felt more like a transaction, affection traded for compliance. Aaron gripped the steering wheel, the memory of her voice fading against the road's hum. He was in a strip mall parking lot now, the neon signs blurred through his windshield. When had it changed? Not all at once, he realized, but in 1,000 small cuts. The late nights when she'd work in silence, ignoring his attempts at conversation. The way she'd dismiss his friends, calling them boring until he stopped inviting them over. The mornings he'd wake up alone, her side of the bed cold, her tablet glowing in the next room. He'd told himself it was stress, her art, her family. But deep down, he'd known. She was pulling away, and he was letting her. Worse, he was disappearing. The Aaron who'd laughed at her bad puns, who'd coded side projects for fun, who'd dreamed of more than just paying the mortgage, he was gone. He hadn't called his sister in months, hadn't seen his college friends in years. Leah filled his world, her moods dictating his days, her needs overriding his own. He'd stayed because he loved her. Or thought he did. Because leaving meant admitting failure, meant facing the void of who he'd become. But the tea had changed that. Not just the burn, but the look in her eyes. No regret, only defiance. It wasn't the first time she'd lashed out, but it was the first time he'd seen it clearly. She'd hurt him, and she didn't care. The thoughts settled in his chest, heavy but sharp, cutting through the fog of years. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over names he hadn't called in too long. Ben, his old college roommate, flashed in his mind. Steady, kind, the one who'd always seen through Aaron's excuses. Aaron hesitated, the weight of shame pressing down. What would he even say? My wife threw tea at me. I don't know who I am anymore. But the alternative was driving in circles, alone with memories that hurt more than they healed. He dialed, his heart pounding. The line rang once, twice. Then Ben's voice, warm and familiar. Aaron? Man, it's been forever. Aaron closed his eyes, the ache in his chest loosening just enough to breathe. Yeah, he said, voice rough. Can we talk? Aaron's car idled in front of Ben's apartment, a squat brick building with chipped paint and a flickering porch light. He hadn't been here in years, not since Leah started calling Ben that loud guy from college, and Aaron, too tired to argue, let the visits fade. His phone sat in the cup holder, Ben's last text glowing. Doors open. Get in here. Aaron's chest tightened, a mix of relief and shame. He didn't deserve this kindness, not after ghosting Ben for so long, but his shirt still clung to him, stiff with dried tea, and the memory of Leah's eyes, cold, unyielding, pushed him out of the car. Ben answered the door before Aaron could knock, his broad frame filling the entryway. He hadn't changed much, same messy beard, same crooked grin, but his eyes sharpened when they landed on Aaron's soaked shirt and slumped shoulders. Jesus, man, Ben said, stepping aside. You look like you fought a monsoon and lost. Aaron tried to smile, but it came out wrong, more grimace than grin. Something like that. Ben's place was small, a bachelor's haven of mismatched furniture and vinyl records stacked against the walls. A pizza box sat open on the coffee table, half-eaten slices curling at the edges. Ben gestured to the couch, already pulling a beer from the fridge. Sit. Drink. Talk when you're ready. Aaron sank into the cushions, the beer cold against his palm. The room felt safe, like a bubble outside time, and for a moment, he could almost pretend he was back in college, crashing at Ben's dorm after a late-night study session, laughing over nothing. But the burn on his chest throbbed, grounding him in the present. He took a sip, the bitterness sharp, and stared at the floor. Ben sat across from him, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. He didn't push, didn't fill the silence with small talk. That was Ben, always knowing when to wait, when to listen. Aaron envied it, the way Ben seemed so sure of himself, so unburdened. He'd been Aaron's roommate for 3 years, the guy who'd dragged him to parties when he'd rather code, who'd talked him through his first breakup. They'd stayed close after graduation, but Leah's dislike and Aaron's compliance had let the distance grow. Now, sitting here, Aaron felt the weight of that loss. She threw tea at me, he said finally, the words spilling out before he could stop them. Hot tea, right in the middle of a fight. Ben's eyebrows shot up, but he didn't interrupt. Aaron kept going, the story pouring out in jagged pieces, Chad's latest loan request, Leah's defense of him, the argument that spiraled until the mug hit the floor. He told Ben about the money, the years of bailing Chad out, the way Leah twisted every no into a betrayal. His voice cracked when he described her face after, the defiance that hurt more than the burn. Because you needed to, Ben said simply. He leaned back, his expression steady but serious. And because it's not just about the tea, is it? Aaron shook his head, the question prying open something he'd kept locked away. It's everything. She's different now. Or maybe I'm seeing her clearly for the first time. She makes me feel like I'm the problem, like I'm failing her if I don't do what she wants. And Chad, he's always there, taking, lying, and she lets him. I'm so tired, Ben. I don't know how I got here. Ben set his beer down, his jaw tight. You didn't get here alone. She's been pulling you down, Aaron. That's not love. It's control. The word hit like a punch. Control. Aaron wanted to argue, to defend Leah, to say it wasn't that simple, but the memories flooded in. Her silences when he disagreed, her accusations when he set boundaries, the way she'd make him apologize for her anger. He thought of the friends he'd lost, the hobbies he'd dropped to fit her moods. His throat burned, not from the tea but from the truth he couldn't dodge anymore. She's abusing you, Ben said, his voice low but firm. Not with fists, but with words, with guilt. That's what this is. You don't throw scalding tea at someone you love and walk away like it's nothing. Aaron flinched. The label, abuse. Too raw, too big. But it fit, didn't it? The gaslighting, the blame, the way he'd started doubting his own mind. He'd spent years telling himself it was stress, her passion, her family drama, anything but this. His eyes stung and he blinked hard, ashamed of the tears threatening to spill. Ben moved to the couch, sitting beside him. Hey, he said, his hand on Aaron's shoulder. You're not weak for this. You're here. That's the first step. Aaron nodded, unable to speak. The weight of years poured out, not in words now, but in the silence between them, in the way Ben didn't look away. They sat like that for a while, the clock ticking softly, the beer growing warm. Aaron's chest loosened, the panic easing just enough to think, "What do I do now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ben leaned back, exhaling. "You breathe. You stay here tonight. Couch is yours. Tomorrow we figure out the next move. You're not alone in this, okay?" Aaron looked at him, the steadiness in Ben's eyes grounding him. For the first time that day, he felt something like hope. Not bright, not certain, but there, a crack of light in the dark. He nodded, the smallest of smiles tugging at his lips. "Okay." Ben clapped his shoulder, standing. "Good. Now eat some pizza before it turns to cardboard." Aaron laughed, a shaky sound but real. He reached for a slice, the normalcy of it strange and comforting. The road ahead was blurry, but sitting here with Ben's quiet strength beside him, he felt the first stirrings of clarity. Leah's hold was slipping, and he wasn't going back. Aaron woke to the smell of coffee and the faint hum of Ben's record player spinning something soft and jazzy. The couch had left a kink in his neck, but the ache in his chest felt different, less raw, more like a bruise than a fresh wound. Sunlight slanted through the blinds, catching dust motes in the air, and for a moment, he could almost pretend yesterday hadn't happened. Then his phone buzzed on the coffee table, Leah's name flashing on the screen. His stomach twisted, and the moment shattered. He didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, he sat up, rubbing his face, and found Ben in the kitchen, pouring coffee into mismatched mug. "Morning," Ben said, sliding one over. "You sleep at all?" "Ah," Aaron lied, taking the mug. The warmth grounded him, a small anchor against the storm brewing in his head. "Thanks for everything." Ben waved it off, leaning against the counter. "Don't thank me. Just tell me what's next. You can't keep driving around like a lost puppy." Aaron stared into his coffee, the question heavier than it sounded. Next meant decisions, real ones, not just running away. The thought of going back to Leah, to that kitchen, to her voice slicing through him made his skin crawl. But leaving for good? That was a cliff he wasn't sure he could jump off. Not yet. "I don't know," he admitted. "I can't go home, not after." He gestured vaguely at his chest, where the tea's faint burn still lingered under his borrowed t-shirt. "But I don't know where to start." Ben nodded, like he'd expected that. "All right, let's break it down. You need a place to stay, something that's yours. You need to protect your money, your head, all of it. And you need to know your rights. That means a lawyer, or at least someone who can tell you what's what." "A lawyer?" Aaron's voice fracked. The word felt final, like signing a death certificate for his marriage. "That's a lot." "It is," Ben said, unflinching, "but so is getting scalded by your wife. You're not playing house anymore, Aaron. You're figuring out how to survive." The bluntness stung, but it cleared the fog. Aaron nodded, slow, the pieces clicking into place. A plan, not a full map, but a first step. Ben grabbed his laptop, pulling up rental listings and legal aid websites, his practicality a lifeline. They spent the morning sketching out basics: a cheap apartment, a separate bank account, a consultation with someone who could explain divorce or separation. Each idea felt like a brick laid towards something solid, something Aaron could stand on. By noon, they'd found a few listings, modest studios he could afford on his salary, and a legal clinic offering free initial advice. Aaron jotted down numbers, his hand steadier than he expected. It wasn't freedom, not yet, but it was motion. For the first time in years, he was choosing his own path, not Leah's. Then his phone buzzed again. Leah, this time a voicemail. He hesitated, Ben watching him over the laptop. "You don't have to listen," Ben said. "But if you do, don't let her pull you back in." Aaron nodded, his thumb hovering over the play button. He hit it, holding the phone to his ear, braced for impact. "Aaron, where are you?" Leah's voice was a storm of rage and tears, each word a barb. "You just walk out, no explanation, no nothing? You're breaking this family apart. Chad's a mess, I'm a mess, and you're out there playing victim. You think you're so perfect, don't you? Call me back, now." The message ended, and Aaron's pulse raced, guilt and fear clawing at him. Her words were familiar, the same ones she'd used to keep him in line. "You're selfish, you're hurting me, you're the problem." He could picture her pacing their kitchen, eyes flashing, ready to twist his absence into another failure. Part of him wanted to call, to explain, to fix it. That part had always won before, but Ben was watching, and the plan they'd made sat on the table, real and tangible. Aaron set the phone down, his hands shaking. "She thinks I'm abandoning her," he said, voice low. "Like I'm the one who broke this." "She's wrong," Ben said firmly. "She's trying to control the story. Don't let her. You left because you had to, because she hurt you, again." Aaron swallowed, the truth settling unevenly. He wanted to believe Ben, wanted to hold on to the clarity from last night, but guilt was a heavy thing, years of it layered deep. Had he tried hard enough? Had he loved her wrong? The questions gnawed, but they didn't erase what she'd done. The tea, the years of blame, the way she'd made him smaller. "I don't know if I can do this," he admitted, staring at the laptop screen. "Leaving, starting over, it's terrifying." Ben leaned forward, his voice steady. "It is. But you're already doing it. You're here, you're thinking. That's more than you could do yesterday." Aaron nodded, the words sinking in. Fear was still there, a shadow he couldn't shake, but so was something else. Resolve, fragile but growing. He picked up the phone again, not to call Leah, but to dial the legal clinic. The line rang and his heart pounded, but he didn't hang up. By evening, he had an appointment for the next day and a list of apartments to check. Ben offered the couch for as long as he needed, no questions asked. Aaron lay awake that night, Leah's voicemail echoing in his head, but so did Ben's words. "You're not alone." He clung to that, a lifeline in the dark. The storm was coming, Leah's rage, his own doubts. But for now, he had a plan. And that was enough. Aaron stood on the cracked sidewalk outside a low-rise building, its faded yellow paint peeling like old skin. The address matched the listing Ben had circled, a modest studio, cheap enough for his salary alone. His stomach churned, not just from nerves but from the text Leah had sent an hour ago. "You're throwing everything away. Don't expect me to wait." He'd read it twice, then shoved his phone in his pocket, refusing to let her words derail him. Not today. The door buzzed, and a woman's voice crackled through the intercom. "You, Aaron? Come on up." Her tone was warm, weathered, like she'd seen 1,000 tenants and still cared. He climbed the narrow stairs, the smell of mildew and lemon cleaner sharp in the air, and found her waiting at the top. Mrs. Rayner was short, maybe 60, with silver hair pulled into a loose bun and eyes that seemed to read him before he spoke. "You're early," she said, smiling as she shook his hand. "Good sign. People who show up late usually flake on rent." Aaron managed a weak laugh. "I try not to flake." She led him down a dim hallway, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. "The place isn't fancy," she said, unlocking a door marked 3B, "but it's clean and the heat works. You're looking for something short-term, you said?" Yeah," Aaron replied, his voice tight. "Maybe. I'm figuring things out." Mrs. Rayner glanced at him, her expression softening. "Aren't we all? Come on in." The apartment was small, a single room with a kitchenette in one corner, a bathroom tucked behind a flimsy door, and a window facing a brick alley. The walls were bare, the carpet worn but spotless. It wasn't much, but it was empty, a blank slate. Aaron stepped inside, his shoes loud against the silence, and tried to picture himself here. A bed by the window, a desk for his laptop, no arguments, no broken mugs. The thought was thrilling and terrifying, like standing at the edge of a dive he wasn't sure he could make. Mrs. Rayner leaned against the counter, giving him space. "Last tenant was here 2 years. Quiet guy, kept to himself. You seem like the type." Aaron nodded, unsure how to respond. He walked to the window, peering at the alley below. A stray cat darted between dumpsters, quick and free. He envied it. "How soon could someone move in?" he asked. His voice steadier than he felt. "Next week, if you're serious," she said. "Background check, first month's rent, small deposit. You got a job?" "Software engineer," he said. "Steady. Been at it 10 years. She nodded, satisfied. "Good. World needs folks who keep things running. You got questions?" He had 100. Could he afford this alone? Could he handle the solitude? Could he really leave Leah behind? But none felt right to ask. Instead, he said, "It's quiet here, isn't it?" "Mostly," Mrs. Rayner said, her smile wry. "Except when the neighbors get into it over parking. You'll live." The normalcy of her words steadied him. He could imagine it, mornings with coffee he made himself, evenings without Leah's voice slicing through his thoughts. It wasn't a dream. It was possible. Real. His chest loosened, hope flickering like a candle in a draft. Then his phone buzzed again. He hesitated, but Mrs. Rayner's calm presence gave him courage. He pulled it out, expecting another text from Leah. Instead, it was an email from his bank, account frozen due to suspicious activity. His pulse spiked. Leah. She had access to their joint account, the one with most of his savings. He opened the email, scanning the details. Attempted transfers. Lock pending review. A second text followed. "You want to play games? Fine, good luck." Anger flared, hot and sharp, but fear followed fast. That account was his safety net, his means to start over. Leah knew it, and she'd struck where it hurt most. His hand shook as he pocketed the phone, aware of Mrs. Rayner watching him. "Everything okay?" she asked, her tone gentle but not prying. Aaron swallowed, forcing a nod. "Just some complications. I'll figure it out." She studied him, her eyes kind but knowing. "You remind me of my son," she said after a moment. "Took him a while to leave a bad situation. Hardest thing he ever did, but he's happier now. Whatever you're figuring out, you'll get there. The words landed softly, like a hand on his shoulder. Aaron blinked, his throat tight. Thanks, he managed, the gratitude real. Mrs. Rayner didn't know his story, but she saw enough, and that was more than he'd expected. They talked details, lease terms, utilities, a move-in date if he wanted it. Aaron's mind raced, Leah's text and the frozen account looming, but he focused on Mrs. Rayner's voice, her steady practicality. This apartment wasn't just a room, it was a choice, a line he could cross. I'll take it, he said as they stepped back into the hall, the words out before he could second-guess them. I'll get you the paperwork tomorrow. Mrs. Rayner nodded, handing him her card. Good. You need anything, you call. I'm not just the landlord, I'm the nosy neighbor, too. He smiled, a real one this time, and thanked her again. As he descended the stairs, the weight of his decision settled heavy, but not crushing. Leah's retaliation stung, but it also clarified things. She wasn't fighting for him. She was fighting to keep him trapped. He wouldn't let her. In the car, he called Ben, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. I found a place, he said. And Leah froze our account. Ben cursed under his breath. Okay, we'll deal with it. You signed the lease? Tomorrow. Good. That's your ground, Aaron. Hold it. Aaron nodded, even though Ben couldn't see. The apartment wasn't home, not yet, but it was his. A start. Leah could threaten, could lash out, but she couldn't stop him. Not anymore. Aaron sat in a stiff chair in Ms. Collins' office, the air smelling faintly of lavender and printer ink. The room was small but sharp, polished wood desk, neatly stacked files, a window letting in pale afternoon light. He'd expected something colder, more intimidating, but Ms. Collins herself disarmed him the moment she walked in. Mid-40s, with a crisp blazer and a gaze that cut through nonsense, she shook his hand firmly and sat across from him, her notepad open. So, Aaron, she said, her voice calm but direct. You're here because you're considering separation, maybe divorce. Why don't you start with what brought you in? He shifted, his hands clasped tight in his lap. The question felt too big, like trying to sum up a decade in a sentence. Ben had driven him here, waiting in the car now, his encouragement echoing, just tell the truth. You've got this. But the truth was messy, and Aaron wasn't sure where to begin. My wife, we're not working, he said, the words clumsy. She threw hot tea at me last week. That was the last straw, I guess. Ms. Collins' pen paused, her eyes narrowing slightly, but she didn't flinch. That's assault, she said matter-of-factly. I'm sorry you went through that. Does she been physically violent before? Aaron shook his head, then hesitated. Not like that. But she yells. Blames me for everything. Makes me feel like I'm always wrong. And her brother? He keeps asking for money, and she expects me to pay. I've been trying to hold it together, but I can't anymore. She nodded, jotting something down. Sounds like emotional and financial abuse, possibly. Control through guilt, manipulation, maybe isolating you from others. Does that resonate? The words hit like a bell, clear and undeniable. Aaron thought of Ben's couch, the first place he'd felt safe in years. He thought of his sister's unanswered emails, the friends he'd let fade, the way Leah's moods had shaped his life. Yeah, he said, his voice thick. That's exactly it. Ms. Collins leaned forward, her tone steady but kind. You're not alone in this. What you're describing is common, and it's not your fault. Let's talk options. You mentioned separation. Legal separation can give you space, protect your assets, set terms while you decide on divorce. Divorce is more final, dissolves the marriage entanglements. Aaron's chest tightened. Divorce. The word was a blade, cutting through the last threads of hope he'd clung to. He'd loved Leah, once. Her laugh, her art, the way she'd made him dream bigger. Could that really be over? He pictured her now, not the woman from their bookstore days, but the one who'd stood in their kitchen unapologetic as tea dripped from his shirt. That Leah wasn't his partner. I don't know if I'm ready for divorce, he admitted, his voice low. But I can't go back. Not to her, not to how things were. Ms. Collins nodded, no judgment in her eyes. That's okay. You don't have to decide today. Legal separation can be a step, a way to protect yourself while you figure it out. We'd file paperwork, outline terms for finances, living arrangements. If she's frozen your account, we can push to unfreeze it, ensure you have access to your money. He exhaled, the practicality of it grounding him. What happens after we file? She'll be served papers, Ms. Collins said. She'll have a chance to respond, agree, contest, or negotiate. Given what you've said, we'll request protections, like keeping her from draining accounts further. If she's volatile, we can keep your new address confidential for safety. Safety. The word jarred him. Did he need that? Leah's texts flashed in his mind. Good luck, you're throwing everything away, and the tea, the mug shattering, maybe he did. The thought made him sad but also clear. He wasn't imagining things. This was real. Okay, he said, his voice firmer. Let's do the separation. Whatever keeps me free. Miss Collins smiled, a small, approving curve of her lips. Good choice. I'll draft the paperwork. We'll need some details, finances, assets, any incidents you want documented. The tea, for instance. That's significant. Aaron nodded, the weight of it settling. Documenting the tea felt like betraying Leah, but also like honoring himself. He wasn't just running now, he was building a case, a boundary she couldn't cross. They spent the next half hour going over specifics. His income, the joint account, the apartment lease he'd signed with Mrs. Rayner. And Miss Collins was thorough, her questions sharp but never rushed, and by the end, Aaron felt lighter, like he'd shed a layer of fog. As he left her office, the papers promised by tomorrow, his phone stayed quiet, no texts, no calls. He'd half expected Leah to sense this move, to lash out again, but the silence was its own relief. Ben was waiting in the car, scrolling his phone, and looked up as Aaron slid in. "How'd it go?" Ben asked, tossing his phone aside. Aaron leaned back, staring at the dashboard. "We're starting with separation. She'll be served soon. It's..." Ben clapped his shoulder. "That's huge, man. Proud of you." Aaron didn't feel proud. Not yet. He felt scared, sad, like he was mourning something he'd already lost. But there was something else too, a spark of power, small but growing. He'd said yes to himself, to a life without Leah's control. The bank account was still frozen, the future still blurry, but Miss Collins' voice echoed, "You're not alone." For the first time, he believed it. Driving back to Ben's, he let himself imagine the apartment again, empty, his, a place to start over. It hurt, but it also felt right. The marriage was beyond repair, and admitting that wasn't failure, it was freedom. Aaron stood on the porch of the house he'd once called home, the key cold in his hand. The door looked the same, white paint chipped at the edges, a dent from when Leah had slammed it during a fight, but it felt foreign now, like a place from a dream he'd outgrown. Miss Collins had warned him not to come alone, but Aaron needed this. Not just to grab his things, documents, clothes, the old journal he'd stopped writing in, but to face Leah, to say what he hadn't said when the tea hit his chest. He needed to close this door himself. He knocked first, a courtesy she didn't deserve, but one he gave anyway. The weight stretched, his pulse loud in his ears, until the lock clicked and Leah opened the door. She stood there, arms crossed, her dark curls pulled back, her eyes sharp and guarded. No surprise, no warmth, just a wall of defiance. "You're back," she said, her voice flat. "Took you long enough." Aaron swallowed, his throat dry. "I'm not staying, I just need to get some things. And? We need to talk." She stepped aside, her silence louder than words. The house smelled of her lavender candles, but the air felt stale, heavy with unspoken fights. The kitchen table was cluttered with her sketch pads, a half-empty coffee mug sitting where his used to be. He avoided looking at the spot by the sink, where the tea had spilled, where everything had broken. Leah leaned against the counter, watching him like a hawk. "So, what? You're here to lecture me? Tell me I'm the bad guy?" "No," Aaron said, setting his empty duffel bag on the floor. He'd rehearsed this, late at night on Ben's couch, but the words felt fragile now, exposed. "I'm here to tell you why I'm leaving. You deserve to hear it, and I need to say it." Her laugh was sharp, cutting. "Oh, please. You're leaving because you're weak, because you can't handle a real relationship, real problems. You think you're so perfect, Aaron, but you're just running away." The words stung, familiar barbs she'd thrown before. A week ago, they'd have hooked him, pulled him into her orbit of guilt. But now, standing in this house that wasn't his anymore, he saw them for what they were, deflections, not truths. He took a breath, steadying himself. "I'm leaving because I can't live like this," he said, his voice low but firm. "You hurt me, Leah. Not just with the tea, though that was bad enough. You've been hurting me for years. The way you blame me, control me, make me feel like I'm never enough. I tried to make it work. I tried so hard. But I'm done." Her face shifted, a flicker of something, shock, maybe hurt, before it hardened again. "You're done, just like that? After everything we've built?" She stepped closer, her voice rising. "You think you get to walk away clean? You're breaking this family, Aaron. Chad's falling apart, I'm falling apart, and you don't even care." "Chad's not my responsibility," Aaron said, sharper than he meant to. "He's been taking from us, from me, for years, and you let him. You defend him, no matter what he does. And you make me the villain for saying no. That's not love, Leah. That's manipulation." Her eyes widened, and for a moment he thought she might cry. Instead, she laughed again, colder this time. "Manipulation? You're unbelievable. You're the one who's changed, Aaron. You used to care about me, about us. Now you're off playing victim, acting like I'm some monster. You're pathetic." The insult landed, but it didn't sink in like it used to. He saw it now. Her pattern, the way she twisted his words, turned his pain into her weapon. He thought of Ms. Collins' calm voice, Ben's steady presence, Mrs. Raynor's kindness. They'd all seen what Leah couldn't or wouldn't. He wasn't pathetic. He was surviving. "I'm not here to fight," he said, keeping his tone even. "I'm filing for legal separation. You'll get the papers soon. I'm not trying to hurt you, Leah, but I have to protect myself. I can't keep living in your storm." Her face crumpled, and the tears came fast, her voice breaking. "You're abandoning me, just like everyone else. I gave you everything, Aaron, my heart, my dreams, and you're throwing it away. How can you do this to me?" The guilt hit hard, a reflex honed by years of her tears. He wanted to comfort her, to take it back, to make her stop hurting, but he saw it clearly now. Her pain was real, but so was her control. She'd used tears before, to pull him back, to make him doubt himself. "Not this time. I'm sorry you're hurting," he said, and he meant it. "But I can't fix this. We're not good for each other anymore. I need to go." She stared at him, tears streaming, but her voice turned venomous. "Go then. Run to your sad little life. You'll regret this, Aaron. You'll see how alone you really are." The threat hung there, heavy, but it didn't shake him. He nodded, accepting it, and turned to gather his things. The duffel filled quickly, birth certificate, passport, a few shirts, the journal he'd abandoned when Leah called it pointless. Each item felt like a piece of himself reclaimed, small but significant. He zipped the bag, his hands steady now. Leah watched, silent, her tears drawing into a glare. He paused at the door, looking at her one last time. She was still beautiful, even in her anger. But she wasn't his anymore. Maybe she never had been. "I hope you find what you need," he said quietly. "I really do." She didn't answer, her lips pressed tight. Aaron opened the door, stepped onto the porch, and pulled it shut behind him. The click was soft, final, like the end of a long exhale. No slam, no drama, just dignity, his own, held close. He walked to his car, the duffel light on his shoulder. The street was quiet, the evening air cool against his skin. He didn't look back. The house, Leah, the years of trying. They were behind him now, a chapter closed. His heart ached, but it also beat stronger, freer. He'd said what he needed to, and he'd walked away whole. As he drove to Ben's, the sky darkened, stars faint but visible. The road ahead wasn't clear, but it was his, and that was enough. Aaron carried the last box into his new apartment, the cardboard damp from a morning drizzle. The studio looked smaller than he remembered from the tour, bare walls, a single window framing the gray alley. But it was his. No echoes of Leah's voice, no shards of broken mugs. Just space, empty and waiting. He set the box down, his arms aching, and stood in the silence, letting it settle. This was day one. Moving in took most of the morning. Ben had helped, hauling boxes from his car while cracking jokes about Aaron's minimalist packing. 2 suitcases, a laptop, and a thrift store lamp. "You're like a monk," Ben had said, grinning. "Next you'll be meditating on the floor." Aaron had laughed, the sound surprising him. It felt good, like stretching a muscle he'd forgotten. Now, alone, he unpacked slowly. A stack of clothes went into a second-hand dresser Mrs. Raynor had left for him. His laptop found a home on a folding table, its screen a familiar comfort. The journal from the old house, dog-eared, half-filled, but years ago, sat unopened on the bed. He'd grabbed it on instinct during his last talk with Leah, not sure why. Now, it felt like a tether to a version of himself he wanted back. The first night was strange. The apartment was too quiet, the hum of the fridge loud in the dark. Aaron lay on a borrowed air mattress staring at the ceiling, half expecting Leah's voice to cut through the stillness. Her absence was a relief but also a void, a space where her moods used to dictate his. He wondered what she was doing, sketching maybe, or raging to chat about his betrayal. The thought stung, but less than it would have a week ago. He rolled over, forcing his mind to the present. This was his bed, his choice. That had to be enough. Morning came, soft light filtering through the alley window. Aaron woke early, a habit from years of dodging Leah's temper. He made coffee in a cheap machine Ben had gifted him, the gurgle and hiss oddly comforting. Sitting at the table, mug in hand, he watched steam curl in the air. No arguments, no demands, just him, deciding what came next. It felt peaceful but also unsteady, like walking without a crutch. He opened the journal, its pages yellowed at the edges. The last entry was from 3 years ago, a rambling note about a coding project and a movie he and Leah had watched. His handwriting was looser then, full of ideas and ease. He traced the words, mourning that Aaron, curious, hopeful, unburdened. Could he find him again? He picked up a pen, hesitant, and wrote, "Day 1. I'm here. It's quiet. I don't know who I am yet, but I'm trying. The words felt small, but they were his, a start. Routine came slowly, built from necessity and choice. He cooked for one, simple things, eggs or pasta, learning to season without Leah's critique. The first burned attempt made him laugh, a sound that bounced off the walls, free. He walked to a nearby grocery store, picking out what he wanted. Apples, not her preferred pears, dark chocolate, not her hated mint. Each choice, tiny as it was, felt like reclaiming ground. Work kept him anchored, coding from the apartment now, his laptop a bridge to normalcy. His boss didn't ask about the address change, and Aaron didn't offer. Outside work, he reached out, tentative but deliberate. A text to an old coworker, a call to his sister that went to voicemail. He didn't push, but the act of trying loosened something in him. A knot of isolation Leah had tied. The journal became a ritual. Most nights, after dinner, he'd write, sometimes a sentence, sometimes pages. Memories of Leah surfaced. Not all bad. Her laugh at the beach, her sketches pinned to their fridge. But so did the truth. Her silences, her blame, the way she'd made him smaller. Whiting didn't erase the pain, but it gave it shape, something he could hold and set aside. One night he wrote, "I'm not her villain. I'm just me, and that's enough." He stared at the words, testing their weight. They felt true. He started therapy too, a recommendation from Ms. Collins. The first session was awkward, a stranger asking about his life while he fumbled for answers. But the therapist, Dr. Lynn, a quiet one with sharp questions, listened without judgment. "You're grieving," she said, "not just the marriage but who you were in it." Aaron nodded, the insight both heavy and freeing. Grieving meant moving forward, not staying stuck. By the end of the first week, the apartment felt less alien. He hung a cheap print on the wall, an abstract swirl of blues, bought on impulse. He cooked a decent stir-fry, humming a song Leah hated. He wrote in his journal, the pages filling with questions, fears, but also hopes. "What do I want?" he wrote one night. "Not her, not that life, maybe. To build something new." Lying in bed, the air mattress deflating slightly under him. He smiled into the dark. It wasn't joy. Not yet. But it was close. The apartment was his, flaws and all. The routine was his, fragile but growing. He was his too, piece by piece. Starting over wasn't easy, but it was honest, and for the first time in years, Aaron felt like he was waking up. Aaron stood in the community center's meeting room, a paper cup of lukewarm coffee in his hand, watching strangers mill around folding chairs. The book club flyer had caught his eye at the grocery store, a whim, pinned next to ads for yoga and lost cats. He'd hesitated, nearly talked himself out of it, but the apartment's silence had pushed him out the door. 9 months since leaving Leah. And he was ready for voices other than his own. The group was small, maybe 10 people, a mix of ages and faces. The organizer, a wiry man named Sam with glasses perched on his nose, waved him over. "New guy, right? Aaron. Grab a seat. We're on the night circus this week." Aaron nodded, settling into a chair near the back. The discussion started slowly, plot points, favorite characters, but soon cracked open into something deeper. A woman with braided hair talked about loss woven into the story's magic. A retired teacher shared how the circus felt like his old classroom, chaotic but alive. Aaron listened, surprised by how their words stirred him. When it was his turn, he fumbled. "I liked the way the characters kept going, even when things fell apart, like they found something worth holding on to." Sam grinned. "That's it, man, resilience. You nailed it." Afterward, a few stayed to chat. The woman with braids, Nia, asked what brought him there. Aaron shrugged, not ready to spill his story, but said, "Needed to get out more. Books seemed safe." She laughed, her warmth disarming, and invited him to the next meeting. He left with her number scribbled on a napkin, not for a date, but for a friend. And that felt better somehow, lighter. The book club became a rhythm, every other Thursday, a thread stitching him to the world. Nia shared stories of her own, a divorce years back, a daughter in college now. And Aaron found himself opening up, bit by bit. Not the whole truth, not yet, but enough, a bad marriage, a fresh start. Others in the group had their own scars, job losses, sick parents, dreams that didn't pan out. Hearing them made Aaron's pain feel less singular, more like a chapter than the whole book. Writing filled his nights. The journal had grown thick with entries, memories, questions, fragments of hope. But something new was brewing. He'd started fictionalizing his story, not as a memoir but a novel, rough and unnamed. A man escaping a shadowed life, finding light in small places. The words came haltingly, his coding brain unused to metaphors, but each sentence felt like carving a path. He'd read bits to Drocklin in therapy. Her nods included, "You're naming your truth," she'd said. "That's power." One evening, after a book club debate on unreliable narrators, Aaron sat at his folding table, laptop open. The apartment smelled of garlic from his latest stir-fry. the blue print on the wall catching the lamplight. He typed. He didn't know he was free until the door stayed shut behind him. The line felt true, not just for his character but for himself. He saved the file, a quiet pride warming his chest. It wasn't good yet, but it was his. Reaching out became easier too. He'd emailed his sister Claire weeks ago, a short note apologizing for the silence. Life got messy. "I'm sorry, can we talk?" Her reply had been cautious but kind, and they'd started texting. Small things, like her kids' soccer games or his new recipe attempts. One night, he called her, heart pounding as the line rang. When she answered, her voice was the same as he remembered, teasing but warm. "Took you long enough, nerd," she said, and he laughed, tears prickling. They talked for an hour, skirting the heavy stuff. Leah, the years apart, but promising to meet soon. It wasn't fixed, but it was a start. The apartment had become home. A proper bed replaced the air mattress, a rug softened the floor, and a shelf held books from the club. Aaron cooked with confidence now, even tried baking once, the lopsided cookies a victory despite their crunch. He walked the neighborhood, noticing things he'd missed, kids biking past, a mural on the corner store. Joy came in glimpses, fragile but real. A book club night when Nia's joke made him snort coffee. A therapy session where he admitted he liked himself better now, flawed but honest. A morning when he woke, without checking his phone for Leah's texts, her absence no longer a void but a fact. One night, writing in his journal, he paused, pen hovering, and smiled. Not at anything specific, just at the quiet, the lamplight, the man he was becoming. He still had shadows. Nightmares of Leah's voice, guilt over what he couldn't save. The novel's darker scenes poured from those places, raw and jagged. But Dr. Lin's words stayed with him. Healing isn't linear. It's showing up. And he was. Every day, every word, every step. Standing at his window one evening, watching the alley cat dart between shadows, Aaron felt a lightness he hadn't known in years. The world was out there, messy, uncertain, but open. He was part of it again, not hiding, not shrinking. The book club, the novel, Claire's voice on the phone. They were his rhythms now, steady and growing. He turned back to his laptop, the cursor blinking, and typed another line. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. For now, so was he. Aaron sat on a grassy hilltop, the late afternoon sun warming his face, a breeze carrying the scent of pine and earth. Ben was beside him, sprawled on a blanket, cracking open a soda with a hiss. The city stretched below, a patchwork of lights just starting to glow against the dusk. 1 year ago, Aaron had walked away from Leah, from a life that wasn't his. Now, here, with the weight of a finished manuscript and a signed divorce decree behind him, he felt lighter than he ever thought possible. "It's done," Aaron said, his voice steady. "The book, the divorce, all of it." Ben raised his can in a mock toast. To Aaron, the guy who rebuilt himself from scratch. Not bad for a coder. Aaron laughed, the sound easy, unguarded. "Couldn't have done it without you. You know that, right?" Ben waved him off, but his grin softened. Yeah, just don't make me read your book. I'm more of a movie guy." The book, When the Morning Broke, had taken 9 months to finish, a labor of nights spent hunched over his laptop in the studio apartment. It wasn't perfect, Aaron knew. The prose was raw, the metaphors sometimes clumsy, but it was honest, a story of a man clawing his way out of shadows to find light in quiet moments. Coffee in the morning, a friend's laugh, a blank. Dr. Lin had called it catharsis. Aaron called it proof he'd survived. The divorce had finalized last week, a quiet affair handled through Ms. Collins's steady guidance. Leah hadn't fought much, her initial rage giving way to resignation when the bank account was split and the house stayed hers. Aaron didn't want it, didn't need it. He'd taken his share, enough to keep his apartment and start fresh, and let the rest go. Closure wasn't in the papers, though. It was in him, built day by day, choice by choice. They'd talked, he and Ben, about the journey crashes on Ben's couch, the apartment's bare walls, the book club where Aaron found Nia's friendship and other stories. Ben had been there for all of it, a rock when Aaron wavered, a cheerleader when he soared. Now, on this hill, Aaron turned to him, the words heavy with truth. "You saved me, man. That first night when I didn't know where to go, you gave me a place to land." Ben looked away, scratching his beard, clearly dodging the sentiment. "You saved yourself, I just had a couch." Aaron smiled, letting it go. Ben didn't need to say it, his presence said enough. That night, alone in his apartment, Aaron sat at his table, the manuscript printed and bound, a weighty stack of pages. He'd sent it to a few small presses, not expecting much, but that wasn't the point. The point was he'd done it, written something true, something his. But there was one more thing to do, a final thread to tie. He opened his laptop, the screen's glow soft in the dark, and started typing. "Dear Leah," he wrote, the words deliberate. It wasn't a letter he'd send. A Miss Collins would have warned against it, and he had no desire to stir her storm again. It was for him, a way to let go. "I don't hate you," he wrote. "I used to think I did, when the tea burned and your words cut deeper. But I don't. You were hurting too, in ways I couldn't fix. I'm sorry for what we lost, for the dreams we buried. I hope you find peace, like I'm finding mine. This is goodbye, not with anger but with thanks for what we were, and relief for what we're not." He sat back, reading it once, then closed the file. It felt right, like setting down a weight he'd carried too long. Leah was a chapter, not his story. He shut the laptop, the room quiet except for the hum of the fridge, and smiled. Closure wasn't loud. It was this, a moment of calm. The next morning, Aaron walked to a bookstore near his apartment, the manuscript tucked under his arm. It was a small place, shelves crammed with used paperbacks and new releases, the air thick with ink and dust. He'd come here often after moving out, losing hours to novels that reminded him life was bigger than his pain. Today, he had a different purpose. The clerk was busy, so Aaron moved quietly, slipping to a fiction shelf in the back. He pulled the manuscript from its folder, its title When the Morning Broke, handwritten on the cover. No note, no name. Just the book, left for someone to find, or not. He slid it between two novels, its edges blending with the spines, and stepped back. It felt like a secret, a gift to the world that had held him up. He left the store, the bell above the door chiming softly. Outside, the street buzzed, kids laughing, cars humming, life moving forward. Aaron stood there, breathing it in, his heart full but not heavy. He'd come full circle, from a man scalded and lost to one who could stand here, whole. The book was his mark, his way of saying I was here and I'm okay. Walking home, the sun bright above, he felt the rhythm of his new life. Friends waiting, words to write, a sister to visit soon. The hilltop with Ben, the letter to Leah, the book on the shelf, they were his anchors, proof he'd made it. Not to perfection, but to peace. And as he stepped into his apartment, the door clicking shut, he knew. The morning had broken, and he was ready for whatever came next.